Yes, hello and welcome everyone to our unboxing session. Maybe I already can ask Matthijs, Mike, and Erik, Martin to the stage. Okay, now we have Matthijs. Hello, Matthijs and Mike with us. Perfect. And Matthijs, if you can bring up the slides, I think good to go. Martin, hello.
Good morning.
Morning. Yeah, now with the help of the slide. Good morning, everyone here in the audience. I'm really glad to welcome you to our first data space dialogue unboxing event of 2022. My name is Christoph Mertens. I work for the IDSA head office as head of adoption. As such, it's really a super big pleasure for me to have SCSN with great examples here with us on stage, who will in the following 90 minutes show us what SCSN, Smart Connected Supplier Network, really is about. And just to frame this properly and to give you a feeling about how big this really is, for those who followed us since our founding 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, this is not new, but maybe we also have some in the audience who are a bit newer to the game. So when we started our journey as a standardization organization, I mean, standards are basically paperwork, as you most probably also know. We did not imagine that we now 6 years later would already stand on stage and have a look at real life data spaces like SCSN is one, as an enabler for a data economy that brings data sovereignty to its participants. And yeah, I think most of you interested in data economy and the current game with data spaces follow the developments that happen, especially also here in Europe, connected to Gaia X, IDS also. And yeah, everyone that I meet and talk to at least has the same questions. How can we build this thing? How can we make it happen? The vision is great, and I now want to see it fly and move things. I want to be part of this in the real world. And I think we will be able to see a great example of how this could be done also. And yeah, already taking maybe the call for action away and having it right at the beginning, it's like you either can join or can get inspired by this great example and start building your own data space, maybe for your domain, for your community, for your ecosystem. And Matthijs, if you could switch one slide further, we can have a look at the concrete topics that we will deal with in the next 90 minutes.
Yes, trying.
Yeah, switching slides.
I need to hide this. What is it? Always happens.
No worries. That's fine. So I have the agenda luckily already in front of me. So while you fix the PowerPoint switching issue, I already can walk you through what we have topic-wise for you. So first of all, Matthijs will present the journey of SCSN. Yeah? Also, SCSN is a project that is already with us since quite some time. And of course, as you can imagine, in a topic that is just created 6 years ago, there are a lot of things that you still have to figure out once you start walking, really. And yeah, Matthijs will present us some of the what is the magic behind making this fly and bringing it to life. So a deeper look into SCSN and also how it looks today will be something that will be presented by Matthijs and Mike from TNO. Then after this theoretical view on things, let's have a look at how do use cases look like. And we have Martin from ECI here with us, who will present their approach, how they are as software developer, software vendor, part of this data space and what is in for them and also for their customers. So that is a great example. And then the last use case view on this thing is something that I'm really excited about, because it already, for me, as the one caring about adoption of the IDS approach, ramps up what we will observe more often this year. And this is the interoperability between different data spaces. Yeah, so a lot of times we currently talk about one data space for mobility, one data space for supply chains. But at the end, I think we can agree that the data economy will not happen in isolated things. This is where we currently stand. Yeah. So data silos is exactly what we want to overcome, and bringing data spaces together, which is something that TNO is currently working on together with our Japanese member NTT, is something where I'm really looking forward to know more about. And we will close with an outlook. What can we expect in the future? And Q&A. So I see people already putting comments and chats and welfares to the chat. Please make plenty of use of the chat to get in contact with you as audience, with us as moderators, with those on stage. Ask questions. We have like 25 minutes at the end where we can dig into your questions and also discuss a bit about what are your needs, your interests. So without further ado, let's dig into SCSN. I'm really thrilled to hear more about it. Matthijs and Mike, stage is yours, and also Martin. Yeah. Looking forward. Yeah.
So thank you, Christoph, for that introduction. It's very good to be here. For us, it's a little bit challenging in a way. We used to work from home, but today, for the first time in ages, we're back in the office again. And as we're back in the office again, construction works have started here. So I do apologize if at some point you hear some noise in the background, but we have to deal with that, unfortunately. So actually, I'm joined here in the room by Mike Roode, who will take the floor, and by my colleague Erik Cornelisse. Erik, welcome. Due to the restrictions, we'll have to sit a bit apart, but we will manage. And what I would like to start off with is maybe a slightly different angle that we usually take in our presentations of the smart connected supplier network. Because usually we're talking to manufacturing companies who would like to share data amongst each other, because that's what the initiative was started on. But what I would like to do today is to take you through the journey we had over the past few years and how we came to what is now the smart connected supplier network. Also to maybe give it a little bit as an example pathway for others who would like to start similar initiatives as well. And when I thought back about, okay, when did it now actually start? I actually already need to go back a long time. Especially in the digital world, to 2013. Because in 2013, we were joining a European project, an R&D project, which was called iCargo, Intelligent Cargo. It was in logistics, and it had to do with the sharing of data to optimize transport operations, sharing of data between all kinds of actors in the logistics and supply chain. And these were the kinds of pictures we used back then. There were some universities in there. There were some technology companies in there. We had quite a few logistics actors in there. And they said, okay, if we would like to achieve all those optimizations and build those new digitally enabled logistics services, we need to have an ecosystem of them, an ecosystem of logistics actors, but also an ecosystem of data, of all kinds of connected resources. Containers, terminals, warehouses, they all have data, and that data needs to be shared. So we thought about, okay, what can we do to do that? We knew that it was not possible to put all that data into one place, because some of these organizations are competitors of each other. So data sovereignty already started to grow back then, and really on a relatively low TRL level, we thought about, okay, what can we do there? And then we came up with slides like these. So we need to open up logistics, we need to build new digital solutions, and interoperability is a key element of that. So we needed to have interoperability, and we needed to do large-scale data sharing. And to do that, we need to integrate all kinds of different platforms which are there. So over time, we did that. We did use cases. We created some solutions there, some of which are even still in operation today. And then we had the final event of this project. And the final event was in Germany. It was in Munich at the Munich Logistics Fair, which is one of the largest fairs in logistics in Europe. And there was a very small booth somewhere hidden away in a corner of Fraunhofer. Like TNO, Fraunhofer is an applied research organization. Fraunhofer does that in Germany. We do that in the Netherlands. And they had a very tiny booth and said, yeah, we're working on something new, and it's called an industrial data space. They received then a research grant from the federal government in Germany. It's a project we just started. And we said, hey, this is interesting because we have been working on all those topics in logistics, on data sharing, on data sovereignty. And now all of a sudden, people start to build an industrial data space. Maybe this is interesting. Maybe this is something we can learn and we can collaborate. Now, in the meantime, back in the Netherlands, we started to think about, okay, what does this now mean? We see all kinds of new platforms and digital solutions coming up. And traditionally, what you see is what they sometimes call the Red Queen effect. So you have one development, then a competitor comes in, and a new development emerges because of a new technological innovation or a new product proposition. But this time it was different because we saw the emergence of all kinds of new digital platforms. And we saw that they had new business models in them, namely sort of winner-takes-all business model. All data was going to be combined into one place, and at the end of the day, only one platform would result. Because of the strong network effect. And that really strengthened our belief that we needed to have data sovereignty, because we thought from a European, a Dutch, and a German perspective, we need to have competition. We need to have multiple actors who can play along. And then we moved into manufacturing. We did quite a few projects there, and they told us this picture. They said, well, we operate according to the so-called smile curve. What is the smile curve? It shows you where the value is in the manufacturing process. And that has changed over time. So if you go back to the 1970s and the 1980s, you see the dotted line here in the middle. And then you see that there was quite a bit of value being generated in R&D here on the left-hand side, but also in services on the right-hand side. But it was relatively on equal level with production. And this has changed. Outsourcing had taken place, and most value was generated either in R&D and product design, or on the other hand in the back end, so in marketing and services, and much less in production itself. And we were talking to production companies, especially in the high-tech domain. And they said, okay, but if we are just a production company, if we are just an outsourcing partner, then we will lose out, either because we have those digital platforms, which are going to take away our margin, or because we will come under cost pressure from our OEM customers. So can we change that through digitalization? And we started to work with an association called Brainport Industries. And Brainport Industries is representing over 100 high-tech suppliers, so manufacturing companies which supply parts, components, but also large sub-assemblies to high-tech OEMs. Now, what are high-tech OEMs? Companies like ASML in the semiconductor industry, making lithography machines to produce microchips. which you can see on the left of this slide. Medical systems, like you can see in the middle, and several other domains where they use very complex equipment, which are produced according to the principle of high mix. So products are very often really customized to the customer's needs and in a very low volume. So you're talking about very complex, very expensive equipment, which needs to be made at the customer's demand. And those suppliers were supplying to those companies. And they said, well, we also see a different trend and an opportunity through digitalization. Because there too, they said, okay, in the past we just used to do component production, but this has evolved. Our role is growing bigger. We're also involved in quality assurance and the project management and the design and the whole supply chain management and the life cycle management and so on and so forth. We need to integrate with the different tiers we have in the supply network. And data is of the essence to be able to do this. We need to share data if we want to take up this position. So for them, digitalization really was an opportunity to strengthen their position in the production value network, to flatten this smile curve, which you saw in the previous picture, and to build new propositions in the digital field. So we started to work with them. What did we do? We started the Smart Connected Supply Network initiative. And the first thing we did, and this is a picture from one of the earlier sessions we had, was to talk to some first movers, so high-tech suppliers, and we asked them, okay, what are now the most common challenges you face? And they said to us, well, first of all, we have lots of transactions. So we need to share data from one company to the other, see errors, it costs us a lot of money, a lot of manual labor. Can't we make it in such a way that data flows directly from one system to the other? And the second thing they told us, they said, well, if we're able to do that, we can also introduce new digital services which will make our supply network more effective and more resilient, because we have better visibility. We know what is happening within the companies of our suppliers. We can serve our OEM customers in a better way. So we can also strengthen our competitive position if we are able to share data in a better and more seamless way. So that's what they told us. And the second thing we said, okay, let's involve suppliers as well, IT suppliers, like ECI, which we'll talk in a moment. But not only ECI, we actually invited a group of IT suppliers, often competitors of each other. And we said to them, this is the problem of all of your customers, and we can only solve it if we can achieve a situation where we have interoperable systems. They cannot do it alone, they have to work together, but you need to work together as well, because all the systems you provide to your various customers, manufacturing organizations, they need to be interoperable. And so for the first time, they all sat around the table on a non-competitive basis and said, okay, let's see what we can do to try and solve this. And already from the beginning, we had a couple of key principles. First of all, we said we want to have manufacturing companies in charge, not like the traditional platforms where you have a new entrant or a digital company taking away the margins. No, we want to have manufacturing companies in charge. They are the ones who are faced with some challenges. We want to serve them with a solution. So they need to be in charge, and we need to collaborate with the IT world on that. We want to have a model which will not result in a winner-takes-all model. So we need data sovereignty. And very importantly, we know that we cannot do this through some sort of hyperscaler centralized cloud environment where all data is being brought together in one place. Because still we have a competitive landscape. The supplying companies work together at some points in time, in other points in time, they compete amongst each other. So centralized solutions are not the way to go for. We need to have a more federated, decentralized approach. And we said we can talk about this for ages, but we have to start somewhere. So we took what we call the pressure cooker approach. We started to work with this group of first movers, with those IT companies in a small setting. Actually, the room which we're in now was one of the rooms where we had one of the first sessions back then, just to come up with an initial result, with some initial agreements which companies could implement, the manufacturing companies, as well as the IT providers. And that marked the start of SCSN. And then we started to grow. So in 2016, we said, okay, this is no longer just an initial project. We need to really turn this into a larger group of companies. So we said this is a field lab or a digital innovation hub. And we launched it at the Hanover Fair with much fanfare. You can see here in the picture our Prime Minister who was there to launch it, and several of the organizations which represented it. And in front with the orange tie, there's John Blankendaal of Brainport Industries, the leader of this initiative, and also a valued IDSA member. So that was on the manufacturing side. At the same time, we said, okay, but we need digital technologies. We know that existing cloud paradigms, those centralized solutions or traditional EDI solutions will not work. We have to think about new approaches to do this. So between TNO and Fraunhofer, we signed an MOU to start to work on this topic and to see whether we could take those ideas of what was then called the industrial data space to this use case we had, and also to see whether we could set up new use cases with it. So also on the research side and the innovation side, work started back then. And it was signed at a trade visit of His Majesty the King to the south of Germany in 2016. And then we started to grow. So we had this initial result, the pressure cooker. We had the business model in place. We had the innovation on the IDSA side coming up. We said we now need to look into ways to grow this, to adopt this beyond this group of first movers. And we started a project which in English would be translated to links in the chain. So we started to create links between a manufacturing company, one or more technology service providers like ECI, for instance, and another manufacturing company. So we had business-driven use cases there. They could share data between each other. And they really had like a mini project which took the results of our pressure cooker and implemented in that particular case. And the second thing we did is to talk to those manufacturing companies and say, please seek new customers or suppliers where you can create a similar link as well. And we said to the technology service providers, well, you've now done this initial link with 2 or 3 companies. Probably you will have other customers or potential customers where you can repeat the same thing. So there the oil staining started. It started to grow because manufacturing companies had implemented it and started to look for other customers and suppliers, and technology service providers did the same. And furthermore, we started with an initial use case, really focused at the purchase to pay process. But we also saw that companies started to use this for new kinds of data-driven services, which went beyond the traditional purchase to pay process. So in this way, the ecosystem started to grow. And we started to grow also on a European scale. Until then, it was mainly a Dutch initiative with Dutch manufacturing companies. And we joined the European Market 4.0 initiative, which aims to build a connect and produce marketplace, which also integrates things like digital twinning, simulation apps, and all kinds of equipment providers and users. It not only focuses on high tech, that is what SCSN is doing, but also on other domains like plastics and metal processing. And SCSN is now a core part of the Market 4.0 initiative, with other domains and other European countries joining as well. And for us, this really was an ability to start new use cases, so similar links in the chain in other countries, and also to reach out to other technology service providers in other European countries. And this has resulted in further growth of the SCSN initiative. And we also took it to the physical world. So in 2019, the Brainport Industries campus was opened in Eindhoven. This is a Factory of the Future initiative, and SCSN really is the digital backbone of this initiative. So if you have the opportunity to visit, I think it's always much more impressive if you can really see it than through a picture like this. But in over 65,000 square meters, there are Brainport Industries members who are actually doing manufacturing. There are all kinds of digital technology providers providing software and services for manufacturing. And we have innovation and education facilities there as well. So everything is now really coming under one roof, and it's also used as a platform for further development. And with that, maybe I can give the floor to Mike to really take us into the nuts and bolts of SCSN. So I will put it, I think, here on this screen. Yeah, it works. Just need to switch the screen one moment. If you click here on, yeah.
So, thank you, Matthijs, for the introduction, and also thank you, Christoph. I'm Mike de Roode. I'm also a consultant at TNO, so a colleague of Matthijs. Moreover, I'm also the community manager of the Smart Connected Supplier initiative. And in the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will tell you more about what the current state of SCSN is and how we achieved this. So if the presentation will start moving, let me check.
Click again?
Yeah, okay, great. So we were already briefly talked about why data sharing is essential, especially for the manufacturing industry. Moreover, we will detail more what the current state is, and then also we want to disseminate, of course, the great work we already did, and also let it contribute to your work in this data sharing economy. So to first start, this is our Dutch National Smart Industry Initiative, which is also similar to the Industry 4.0 initiative in Germany. And there we have defined as the Netherlands 8 transitions manufacturing companies need to go through in order to keep being competitive in the future. One of these 8 transitions is connected factories, and the Smart Connected Supply Network is, of course, contributing to this transition for manufacturing companies. And Matthijs already introduced very good on the history of the Smart Connected Supply Network, so I will not go into too much detail. But for the Dutch manufacturing companies, it's most essential to keep being competitive in the future, because there are certain factors which are not per se preferable in the Netherlands. So we have relative high wages. There's a lot of competition in the world in manufacturing, and we have quite some labor shortages of technical personnel. So there we identified how can we all contribute to a more competitive manufacturing industry. And one of the main conclusions we had already 8 years ago was to enable companies to collaborate effectively. So if very specialized companies can communicate together, can join forces on R&D, on manufacturing, then the complete supply chain can profit from this. And there we can ensure a connected Dutch supply chain and connected European supply chain, and now we hope also connected global supply chain. So, as Matthijs already told, the focus in the Netherlands is mainly on this low volume industry. So in this low volume production, the need of collaboration is even higher. because the overhead of sharing information to each other, all the manual work, is even more expensive because you cannot divide that across a large production amount. So every manual action has quite a large impact on the total price. And I really want to stress this low volume aspect. So, for example, in the semiconductor industry, in the Netherlands, we have, for example, ASML. And last year, they produced around 140 machines, if I'm correct, with a turnover of about 18 billion euros. So that's quite impressive to have these types of turnover with only such a large amount of machines. So that means if you have to develop more machines, that has quite an impact on the local manufacturing companies, because every suppliers need to ramp up very fast. So you have to do that effectively. And that's why we have started our initiative in the Smart Connected Supplier Network. And then, of course, you will encounter a lot of problems which all of us already saw in the past years. Like that every company has different systems, they all adopt different standards, they do not understand each other, they have different understandings of the same types of information. And this all causes a situation where a lot of work is done manually. So a lot of information is shared via phone, via mail, even via fax in some rare cases. So this is not digitized, it's not automated. So both the seller and the supplier needs to put a lot of manual effort in there in order to make it work. And then even a lot of errors might occur. So it's definitely not optimal. And we are trying to contribute to digitizing and automating these types of processes. So if you take a look at a very basic supply chain picture, so this is of course a bit simplified, but there you see at the left, mostly large companies which assemble the complete product and sell it to an end customer. And on the right, you see a very large network which all contributes to part of the production. So a first-tier supplier is a direct supplier of this OEM, and they build sub-assemblies, so modules contributing to the complete machine. But because these sub-modules are still so complex, they don't build it themselves. So they even have other suppliers contributing to parts of this module. And this process might repeat 4, 5, 6, and in some cases even 10 times. So you have very deep supply chains, which all are very interconnected. And if all these supply chain partners need to manually copy data from each other, then this is of course not optimal and will result in a lot of delays and overhead. Yeah, so Matthijs. So if you take a look, yeah, it's working good. So my apologies. So we were focusing firstly on purchase to pay information. And purchase to pay information is everything related to orders. All administrative information like the orders itself, the quotations, the invoices, the logistical information, but also measurement information, forecasting information, certificates, and everything related to such an order. Because we believe this is the basis of a collaboration. You can all have very advanced AI use cases on, for example, predictive maintenance, which is very important. But for us, it actually started with automating and digitizing the orders, because that's the basis of all collaborations in such a supply chain. So we've started to standardize these types of information, and there we already saw that, especially in the beginning and the end of the supply chain, we tend to have quite large companies, and so definitely not SMEs, but the larger enterprises, and they tend to have also quite extensive IT systems, large IT departments, and also quite already some knowledge on how to digitally exchange information. But if you take a look at the middle of the supply chain, these actually consist mostly of SMEs, and we have a lot of them already in the Netherlands. We have about 80,000 SME manufacturing companies over here. So companies with up to around 100 employees. They tend to have less expertise on digitalization. They also tend to have less budget in order to make these types of digitalizations happen. They cannot simply hire IT consultants to make custom connections. It's way too expensive. It's also way too complex for them. So what we saw is that in the beginning and the end of the supply chain, there were already major steps done in the past decades regarding digitalization, but especially the middle of the chain, and they had a very hard time to join this network. So we said that we want to have an initiative which enables all of these types of companies to join. So the larger, but also the smaller companies. And this puts a lot of focus on scalability. So we need a very scalable solution in order to make this happen, which is also very cost effective. Then if you take a look on the solution, so how did we solve this problem? We actually have two parts of the solution. So on the one hand, Matthijs already mentioned these pressure cooker sessions, and these have resulted in a standard, an information standard. And the standard is basically a language which everyone can speak across the supply chain, and it encapsulates all this purchase to pay information. So everything relating to orders that is captured in this language and heavily standardized. It's an open standard. It can be viewed via the link, but of course we will send the slides also afterwards, so you can also take a look at it yourself. We did not create the standard our own completely, because we also saw the need of integrating international standards, because that makes it easier for adoption and also ensures that if you want to grow globally, it's also easier for the other countries to join. So there we've adopted internationally recognized standards like the Universal Business Language and the e-invoicing of the European Commission, also in this standard. So we did not start from scratch, but we started from these internationally recognized standards and made it specific for the manufacturing industry. But that's only one part of the story. So now we can talk the same language, but that doesn't mean that we already have a very scalable solution. And that's where our second part of this solution comes in, which is actually based on IDS. But before we dive into that, let's take a look at how we did it before SCSN. So especially in 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of focus on what is called EDI, which is illustrated on the left side. So these EDI types of approaches, they often include 2 or more companies, and if they want to share information, then they build a custom connections between these organizations. So they either hire consultants or they let their IT department build such a connection. And this takes quite some investment, of course, quite some time, can take tens of thousands of euros and up to 9 months or even 12 months. But after this initial investment, this connection will work quite well because it's customized for their use case. So it works great. The problem is, of course, that if a new company wants to join, then the same investments needs to be made to connect to this third company. The same for the fourth and fifth, etc. So although this is a very good method in terms of communication, it's not good in terms of scalability. And especially for these SMEs, it's not feasible for them to build custom connections to tens of customers and maybe hundreds of suppliers. That's simply not feasible in terms of cost and return on investment, because they typically don't have very much volume to all of their customers, but simply to a few of them. So this is not ideal. In the past 5 years, we saw another model emerging, which we call the service provider model. So there's an IT company or a broker, or we call it them service providers, and they are focusing on connecting a lot of manufacturing companies. So if you connect to this service provider, they will make sure that you can connect with all the other connected manufacturing companies. So you only need one connection, and then you can communicate with all the other customers. And this is already much more scalable. So we like this model. Only one connection needed, large groups available. So this is great. But we still had 2 major concerns. The first concern is that, say that we have one service provider in the Netherlands or maybe Europe or the world, and the complete world connects to this supplier, to this service provider. Then this service provider has basically a monopoly. They are very powerful. What if they raise prices with 80% overnight? We are all dependent on this one organization. So this is not per se an ideal situation. It's very convenient in terms of technology and scalability, but it's not data sovereign because we are all dependent on one organization. But if you take a careful look at what happened in the past years, we also see that this is not a feasible model at all, because there is not one service provider, but there might be 40 or 50 or maybe 100 already. So then a company needs 100 connections to 100 different suppliers. So this is not really feasible for them. So it's indeed much more scalable as the previous solution, but it's not the end result as we want to see it. So that's where we created another approach. And there we said we really want to ensure that we want to have to connect only once. So not once per company, not once per service provider. We really want to ensure that if a company joins, they only have to connect once. And this needs to be a solution which is, again, very scalable, so the complete supply chain can join. And of course, as Matthijs already mentioned, it needs to be data sovereign from the beginning. So the manufacturing companies need to be in control of their own data. So it should not be output on a central place on one cloud provider. It should be their data, and they should have control about that. And that's where we came up with the so-called four-corner model. And if you recall the right image of the previous slide, then we have these service providers. And what we actually did within SCSN is that we created a network of those service providers. So we basically interconnected all these service providers to each other, therefore ensuring that if you connect to one service provider, then you can also connect to the customers connected to the other service providers. And you may recognize that this is not a new idea, because it's actually, we took a look at the telecom sector, where we have a lot of telecom providers. Maybe you have Deutsche Telekom in Germany, you have KPN in the Netherlands. And actually, I don't know what the technical integration is between KPN and Deutsche Telekom. I simply have a number and I can call someone, and I don't have to care about the underlying technology. It's simply all handled by this telecom provider, and it's offered as a service. And that's exactly what we also want to do in the SCSN network. So we want to have this purchase to pay information available as a service. So individual organizations do not need to have to make large investments, but can simply purchase it as a service. Then, of course, if you take a look at this network, then it's essential that it's data sovereign. So what we did not do is create a central model, one database containing all the SCSN data exchanges. But what we did is we took a look at federated data spaces approaches of the international data spaces. We have adopted that within our network. So all the information is done on a peer-to-peer basis. So a customer talks directly to their suppliers without having to go through all kinds of intermediate services of SCSN. It's all done on a peer-to-peer basis, therefore also ensuring data sovereignty, which is now also available on a very large scale, because these service providers now created all kinds of off-the-shelf integrations with all kinds of existing systems like ERP systems. And they now sell it as plugins or add-ons, as you will see in the next presentation. So to dive a bit more in detail in what IDS means for us, this network, it's developed on top of an IDS data space, and there we used all kinds of IDS services in order to make it happen. So for example, we used a broker for building some kind of address book. So a service which enables you to find each participant of the network and know where to go with your messages. Same for identity manager and all kinds of other services, which are all there to ensure trust to make sure that if you send a message, that you know for sure that it's handed over to the correct participant in this network without a third party also seeing this information. So this is for our network. And if you combine this network approach based on IDS together with this language, then we have a complete solution which can be offered as a commercial service. And this is already done by quite some service providers. So at this moment, we have about 10 service providers in the SCSN network, and they connect between 300 and 400 manufacturing companies in total. So these companies already use the SCSN standard in their day-to-day business for exchanging all kinds of information with their customers and suppliers. So it's actually something which is already being used in practice on a relatively large scale. But of course, we want to extend both from the dimension of connected end users, but also from the service provider perspective. And that's why we also teamed up with a lot of new service providers all across the globe. And Erik will tell you in one of the last presentations about our adventures with NTT Communications in Japan. Okay, so that's basically it for SCSN. Of course, there are all kinds of other things to tell about how you can join SCSN. And there, the most important thing is to know that we have various service providers, and you can simply pick the service provider which suits your use case best, and they will help you with the onboarding process. So that's it for now. We have started as a project. We are now an independent not-for-profit foundation. So we make the long journey from 2013 already. So now let's go to Martin. Martin will tell you more about what SCSN means in practice, because Martin is one of the service providers, ECI Gatewise, and they will tell you how they work with SCSN on a daily basis. So thanks a lot, and next to Martin.
Thank you, Matthijs, and your presentation. Thanks all for being here. I will start sharing my presentation. So if Matthijs can stop sharing. Mine is flickering. I'll try again. Sorry. Let's see how that works. That's a lot better. So yeah, I was asked to tell you on how ECI works with SCSN and IDS on a daily basis. For ECI, I'm responsible for the ECI Gatewise platform and how we can help our customers connect to it. Before we go into the daily basis, a brief introductory of who ECI is and why we made the step to SCSN and IDS. Because we are currently based in Leusden. We're part of an American company, ECI Software Solutions. And when they acquired us several years ago, we had 5 different ERP solutions in the Netherlands. We were 5 different ERP companies in the Netherlands. And when we combined our forces, we saw that there were several challenges to be faced. I'll get into that in a bit. And being part of an American company globally with offices in Europe, Americas, and Australia, we service around 22,500 companies in the manufacturing industry alone, worldwide. So we want to help all those customers digitize in the ERP business, through shop floor, through business intelligence, but also the supply chain management. And that's where Gatewise, SCSN, and IDS comes in. So said, we had 5 different ERP systems. We still do. And we had the challenge of how can we connect all these 5 services amongst each other? Because we had several customers who are buying and selling goods and services amongst each other. So we had one OEM producer, for instance, on ECI Trimergo, but we also had another small to medium enterprise manufacturing company on Ridder IQ, who receives orders from the other customer. So we looked into that. How can we connect all these platforms? And looking at the data space between all these customers. We also saw in the chain, as said by Matthijs and Mike as well, the logistical chain, how to exchange data between companies. That can be orders, that can be assembly drawings, that can be receipts between all these ERP systems, initially between our own ERP systems, but after that, the larger scale, and see how can we enable all these suppliers to connect to our customers. And looking at the past, yes, EDI was available, so that is a connection, was integrated in our ERP systems. But then again, we wanted to bring the game a bit further and make sure that it was without just EDI with one-on-one connections. And we wanted to make sure our customers were able to enter their data into the ERP, send it to their suppliers without them having to re-enter it manually, because that would give issues data security wise, errors on entering. Maybe is it a 0, is it an O, is it a 3, is it an 8? So you'll get all kind of issues with that. So how can we support our customers, and how can we make sure that they can exchange all those data? As Matthijs and Mike already showed you, with all our customers, roughly 3,000 just in the Netherlands, our customers are spread out through the OEM, but also in first, second, and third tier suppliers amongst each other. And having one order in the top line, that generates a lot of data all the way to the back. So everybody gets their purchase order, but then again, they buy their equipment and their supplies from the vendor as well. So one order is a large contribution to the logistical network, and so we have to make sure that we can all connect amongst each other. The data our customers exchange between them are order data, order confirmations, and that's a manual process. If you do it in your ERP currently, you receive an email back from your supplier which states, I can deliver you this amount of goods at that point, and it has this price. We also exchange the packing slips, the receipts of when will the goods be received by the customers. And after the packing slip and the goods have been delivered, you tend to get an invoice, or sometimes you get the invoice before the goods have arrived. But if that goes through the old system, it generates a lot of data. You can send it via email, you can send it via EDIFACT, CSV connections, or by phone. Just call your supplier and make sure that you get the order in. But that's the old way, and you have to interpret your message. Another solution, which have been around for quite a few years, is the EDI connection. But as said by Mike, EDI is an advantage in one point, but also has a disadvantage. For instance, if we were to connect our 3,000 customers in the Netherlands alone with 200 suppliers, it would need roughly 600,000 individual connections between ERP systems. And the customer would need to have the time available to implement that. We would have to need for consultants to be able to supply those connections, and it has to be maintained. Every software change would mean that you have to check the EDI connection again, and with every vendor, the connection was slightly different. So it's not a scalable solution, and especially not if another vendor enters the marketplace or another customer enters the marketplace. So that's where we saw a big disadvantage in the current way of working with the current process of just sending email for your orders, but also the chain integration via EDI. And that's where we started talking with TNO on how can we make sure that we can service our customers better and provide them with a solution. That's where we came up with ECI Gateways as a solution as to where our customers now only connect with one single connection to our platform. So their ERP system is connected just to ECI Gateways for their purchasing, but also for their receiving of supply orders. They connect one way, and the ECI Gateways network, based on the SCSN standard, sends the message through to their suppliers. But what we also see is that our customers connected by a single selection is also purchasing and selling to one of our other ERP customers. So we also make sure that the platform itself is not only open to the larger vendors, but also amongst each others to make sure the data gets exchanged. And it will speed up the process of our customers, digitize their supply chain process, and make sure that they can exchange data. So, as you can see, the benefits we tell our customers and we see every day is they only have to enter the data manually once in the beginning of the process, and it gets transferred all the way down to the end of the supply chain line. They only need one connection to the platform, and if another vendor enters and connects to the platform, they can send their purchase orders to that new vendor actually straight away. So it makes it very easy for the smaller SMEs to connect on a single way, only if they do 10 to 20 orders with a vendor and still digitize their solution and digitize their process. And where does EDS come in for us? Because yes, we can connect 3,000 customers to ECI Gateways, but a lot of vendors and other customers are not on our platform. So it's not a single solution and one vendor takes all, one platform takes all, but we have several platforms in the Netherlands. As you can see, we have Gateways with 5 ERP systems, and we also support other ERP solutions. But some of the other customers and vendors, they select another platform, for instance, Supply Drive, Trade Cloud, or EDI for Steel. And we do want it to connect our customers to those suppliers and those customers as well. So that's why we adopted the TNO and IDS standard to make sure our platform sends out those messages like a cell phone connection, as Mike stated, through the network to other vendors and other platforms of SCSN to make sure that they are connected. And here you can see our belief in it as well, because in this picture you can see My Open Factory, for instance, a German EDI platform, which is currently busy testing their connection to the IDS SCSN network. So to open up their customers in Germany and make sure that our customers from ECI can send purchase orders over to their customers or receive purchase orders from customers connected to My Open Factory. And in the use case, how do our customers benefit from this solution? Now, this is a use case from a customer of ours. They're right at the top. They're a sheet metal working company, so they cut and weld sheet metal in desired specs for our customers. And through the ECI Gateways network, they can purchase their sheet metal from MCB, a metal company, a vendor who supplies sheet metal. But they also receive orders from their customers who are on other ERP system, Trimergo, and they receive orders from Ridder IQ customers. But through the SCSN and IDS network, they can receive orders through to ECI Gateways, through the SCSN IDS network to Supply Drive. That's where it gets delivered, and they can send the purchase order to their supplier. But a customer connected to Supply Drive can also send a purchase order to the company, gets transmitted to Supply Drive via the IDS SCSN network to ECI Gateways, and we make sure it gets delivered on the Ridder IQ platform of their customer. And that also goes for a supplier which is connected to Ketenlink in the Netherlands. Also, they can send their purchase order via Gateways through the SCSN IDS network to Ketenlink and to the supplier. Same goes for the customers here. They can send their purchase order to Supply Drive, the SCSN network, Gateways, and gets received by MCB. Again, through the network. So we open up all the networks to our customers and make sure that they can send and receive all their data through the network, no matter where customers and suppliers are connected. So just to give you a rough view on the wholesale suppliers connected. So these are the larger companies. These are connected to our platform currently. This is very interesting for our ECI customers connected to ECI gateways, so they have a direct connection. But on the other hand, we also connect our companies and our customers via the IDS SCSN network on other platforms. So for instance, Van Egmond Group is connected to the Supply Drive network, but Van Raakstaal is connected on the EDI for Steel platform. And using the SCSN IDS network, we can make sure that our companies can send and receive data with other platforms and make sure that every day-to-day business gets digitized and gets one step ahead towards the future. And to give you some more figures on ECI gateways and how we approach the market, currently we have the largest SCSN platform in the Benelux. We are SCSN native, so everything we do on the platform is just SCSN. There are some other platforms, but they're not SCSN based. They have their own language. We completely adopted the SCSN standard to our platform to make sure we're completely interoperable with other SCSN IDS platforms. Currently, we have more than 200 of our own companies connected to the platform, and we're currently active in discussion with more than 150 vendors and suppliers to connect to our platform. But also the thing is, we partner with other software vendors to make sure that their customers can connect to the SCSN platform without them making their own platform. So we want to make sure that even though on an ERP business they're a competitor, we want to make sure that they can supply their customers with an SCSN IDS connection as well in their own software. And we work together and we make sure that they connect to ECI gateways, and we're partners in that bit, and they can send out their customers and make sure they have the same connection to the internet via the SCSN IDS network. And we're currently talking with 7 more independent software vendors who do not want to make their own platform, who do not want to supply it and maintain it. They want to make sure that their customers get the best experience. And that's where we help them as well on the SCSN IDS way through ECI gateways. How is our business model and plan for our customers? Pretty straightforward. It's a flat fee model, only limited by SCSN messages per month. Just to make sure, to give you a rough estimate, we send out all the messages and message types currently supported by SCSN on version 1. We're expanding those message types to BOM and also purchase orders and so forth and so forth. We keep in active discussion with the T&O guys to make sure that we support every message available. And our customers can switch between purchasing and sales or even both. And we can make sure that they get the IDS connection if they want to make sure that they extend their connection over the networks themselves. Going forward, looking on the future, what we see as ECI is that we get a near 100% connectivity of all our Benelux customers within 5 years. So that's roughly 2,500-3,000 companies connected to the SCSN network. That's what we see where we move forward. An active spread of the SCSN of IDS across Europe and even further. Being a global company, we want to spread it within our own company, also throughout Europe, to make sure that all those companies between several countries make sure that they can exchange information. We have customers in Poland, in Greece, in France, Italy. So we want to make sure they can all exchange data through this network and through this platform to help them grow as a company. And we see a broader adaptation and integration by more software vendors. And as said, though they will all develop their own platform, global connectivity between different standards will grow. We have several standards. Of course, we have the SAP Ariba network, we have AFACT, all sorts of standards, but we do see that they will all connect to each other as the need for information exchange, data exchange will grow. And we need one standard at least to make sure that all the data gets transferred or being able to transfer between all those companies. And we do firmly believe that companies who will not connect on a platform like this or on an SCSN IDS data exchange base will fall behind, because their competitors will be a lot faster in exchanging data, making sure they are competitive within their supply chain. And if you can't do that, then yeah, it's going to be an issue for them. And we see the IDS and SCSN to be a bridge technology between continents to make sure that all the data gets exchanged through these platforms. That's one way. Let's go the other way. And that's what we said to our customers. If you're ready, we're happy to connect you. But thanks on this side to explain the day-to-day base we use ECI Gatewise and SCSN IDS for our customers.
Well, thank you, Martin, for that clear presentation. And I think it's also a very nice bridge to Erik, Cornelisse, who's the project lead of our collaboration with NTT, the Japanese telco. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do a little shuffle here so I can give him the floor. So, floor is yours, Erik.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, I'm Erik Cornelisse, and I will present this practical case in collaboration with NTT, who unfortunately was not able to join, otherwise they would have presented themselves. I will give a brief overview of the intentions of NTT, and then I will explain what we are doing specifically in the NTT collaboration project with TNO.
Nice. Link.
Okay.
You have to make sure your mouse is on this screen.
Yes.
No.
Sorry for the inconvenience. So this slide shows the general problem that NTT is stepping in. It's what we all try to achieve, the exchange of information in a secure and trusted and controlled way. And for that reason, NTT is participating in several European projects, just like Gaia X. And they are developing, or that's not true, they have what they call a secure data platform to support companies in Japan, Asia, and also the companies' representations in Europe with this shared data platform. They participate in multiple projects. Last year, they also shared information with companies in Europe and in Japan. And they see the use of data spaces. They see the use of data spaces not as an add-on to their smart data platform to realize the flexible interconnection, a way to make to realize system integration without less software development effort and faster connections. My colleague Mike explained the burden of doing it in the traditional way, and we try to achieve this much quicker and against less costs. So that's also the same philosophy that NTT has, and they would like to be a service provider, not only for providing the infrastructure, but also the service to have fast connections. So what are we investigating in this NTT project? Well, at a very high level, we tend to draw clouds which exchange information, and it's very easy in PowerPoint to draw a line, but in the real world, it's much more complicated. And therefore, I have made a simple technical overview of what we are trying to do. So it's not my intention to dive into details, but what NTT is trying to build is an own data space and that's on the left. And on the right, you see the SCSN data space. And at the bottom, we have two connectors in different countries, belonging to different data spaces. And what we try to achieve together with NTT is to build a technical interoperable system where at the bottom line, two data spaces can exchange information about their partners and their connections. So the end result would be that if you are connected in the Netherlands via the SCSN data space, you could also reach a company belonging to another data space without knowing the details about how those two data spaces are connected. Virtually, the connectors see each other and connect to each other because the underlying technology is able to share information at a broker base and at the DAPS level. But that should be all be automated and hidden for the users of the data space. So this requires not only using the software components that are used to serve your single data space, but they need to be extended to exchange information across each other. And here we are talking about the technical interoperability. And within project, we are also looking at the semantic interoperability. And of course, you also have to deal with the organizational and legal aspects, but that's for a follow-up project. So what is the test case that NTT has in mind? One of their partners is Omron, and they are a large company with a lot of companies outside Japan as well. And one of the test cases is to not only to calculate CO2 emissions in a single factory, but to do the calculations across the supply chain and eventually combine all the information of the several parts in the supply chain to a single number, a single value for a single product. Well, this is a very long-term ambition, but it's only possible if you are able to collect all the information of all the pieces distributed over the world. And well, back to the project, we start small. So one of the achievements is that we already have exchanged information from the Netherlands through the SCSN network to Omron Japan. So from Omron Netherlands, a European company, to the Japan side. And the next step is to provide this connection with use of an entity data space, connecting with the SCSN data space. So this is a brief overview. And if you have questions about the implementation, we are available for answering them. And this concludes my presentation, and of course, with thanks of NTT. So,
yeah.
Matthijs.
Thanks to you, Erik. I think we will do a shuffle again.
Yes, okay.
I think it's a really nice example of the collaboration of data spaces and the role of the IDSA in there. And it actually brings me, apart from our Q&A, to some kind of outlook. So we know where we stand, where we're coming from, but what are we heading for? And I just would like to make a few remarks on that from our side. So there we go. So first of all, we would like to grow. And I think Martin clearly mentioned that. We want to grow the number of manufacturing companies. We do that through the European Digital Innovation Hubs and all the facilities we have there. But mainly we're basically doing it through the companies involved themselves. It is companies like ECI going to their customers and growing this ecosystem. That's one thing. Second thing is that we would like to grow in other European countries as well. You saw my open factory from Germany, several others from other European countries. And actually, even with the example of NTT, it goes beyond Europe as well. So we think that's important, not only because it is interesting to grow the initiative, but also because it is important for the manufacturing companies who not only compete on a national basis, but also on an international level. And then we think that the data ecosystem should be international as well. And I think it's nicely reflected in IDSA, which went from industrial data space first to international data spaces today. Third thing is that we see new use cases coming up. So we started off with the purchase to pay processes, but as you saw in the NTT presentation, other aspects are important as well, like CO2, or for instance, the European Digital Product Passport. So sharing product lifecycle management data across the supply chain, across the lifecycle of a product for the purposes of sustainability. And from our experience, we see that IDS and the Smart Connected Supplier Network are an ideal platform to do that. And finally, we are growing the necessary cloud services. There was already a question from Sebastian Cleff. He said, well, a connector, that's an important element, and that's fully true. We need those building blocks to set up these kinds of use cases. They came originally from those research projects and those innovation initiatives, but we are now really moving towards a stage whereby we expect communication companies and software providers to provide those services out of the box to potential customers. And finally, and I think that was really nicely reflected in Erik in your presentation, of course, SCSN is one initiative. There are several other successful data spaces as well. For instance, Catena X in the automotive industry. And we need to make sure that there is interoperability between those data spaces. We are getting the message from the companies involved that very often they are involved in different sectors, in different domains, in different regions, which have their own data spaces. So the topic of data space interoperability is high on our agenda for the years to come. So that's a bit from my point of view. There were a few questions in the chat. I know, Christoph, you might also have received some questions beforehand. So with that, I would like to give it back to you. And then we can reflect on it where applicable.
Thanks so much, Matthijs, and also Mike, Martin, Erik, for these great presentations. I was sitting here biting nails almost the entire time because I really was following your explanations and the deep insights you gave into how everything also works, the legacy that comes with it. So thanks a lot for that. Let's continue with some questions. So still we have like 10 minutes left for the audience. Please feel free to raise your questions here in the chat. We can go through it. I did not observe many questions here besides the comment of, you already mentioned it, Sebastian Cleff, what the role of the connector is. I think you made it very clear how important the connector is in your data space. And maybe this also would lead me to the first question towards Martin. So Martin, you as representative of a company that has a standard software product, yeah? What is your view on how to be part of such a data ecosystem? How does the offering towards your already existing customers look like, and how do you deal with this topic?
Well, thanks for the question, Christoph. Well, for us, it's essential that our customers can exchange the data not only within our own platform, Gatewise, but also throughout several other platforms, because our customers do not only do business amongst themselves, but we want to make sure that they can send out everything they have and exchange information with other platforms. So we have a few customers who actually supply to the German automobile industry. So a Gaia connection would be very helpful. but also throughout the world, making sure that, for instance, in Japan, they can send out their purchase orders to suppliers there. So for our perspective, yes, we have a standardized ERP systems, 5. Being interconnected through a single data space is very, very important for our customers on a day-to-day basis.
I cannot underline enough how great this achievement is, because I especially receive a lot of questions from platform providers, marketplace providers, standard software providers that want to step into data spaces and start offering this to their customers. I think it's fair to say that with your example here, with your use case, you showed a very, very good way on how to deal with this topic and how to get things going. And it's only the first starting point for a lot of other companies out there, I guess, who will follow this role model, this example, and also will find their ways into data spaces. You know. This leads me to, because you mentioned it, it's not only about now being compliant to SCSN and being very happy and satisfied with the business you can make within SCSN as one of the concrete data spaces. The example of NTT of Japan having their own idea about data spaces, Data X, Europe with Gaia X, and concrete projects in these contexts, like Catena X is something I saw on one of the slides, Matthijs. How is this connected? Are there already plans, SCSN joining together with Catena X? Because supply chain seems to be like the commonality that you share within these 2 projects also.
That's correct. So yes, we're actively engaging with Catena X and several other initiatives, particularly on the 2 topics. So one is to have standardized solutions available to a large audience, and this includes the IDS connectors. So really the basic stuff, the plumbing you would need for your data spaces, but also some more higher level initiatives. So for instance, in the topic of factory planning, there's DMG Mori, a big machine builder, also providing software for shop floor optimization, which is both part of SCSN and Catena X. And they really like, Martin is doing that with ECI from his perspective. They would like to offer these services in both data spaces. And similarly, there are some things which we did because we started a little bit earlier in time with SCSN. We are providing as lessons learned to Catena X, which we recently started. So yes, we actively try to make those links. But at the very same time, I also see a question in the chat of Christoph Mertens. He mentioned, for instance, the Digital Transport and Logistics Forum. At the end of the day, in all different domains, I think data spaces will emerge. Legal frameworks might be different. Semantics will be different. But we, in my view, need to think about common technological solutions which can be used across data spaces on one hand, so we can grow that market and make it more plug and play commonplace. That's one thing. And the second thing is to make sure that even though you have maybe different technological solutions in different data spaces and different legal arrangement in different data spaces, that you can still be interoperable. And that's not a given today. That's something we investigate as a research organization, and what we will continue to do in the years to come.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthijs. So the question of Christoph also pointing at many other different initiatives out there besides Catena X, like Silicon Economy by front of IML here in Dortmund also, etc., is a very fair point. And as I said in the introduction, I think with what we saw here today, this is only the ramp up for a much, much larger discussion we will have to have throughout this year, talking about the interoperability between different data spaces. Because also, and this is my 2 cents from the IDS perspective to this, look at the example of NTT building Data X. Look at Catena X talking about their infrastructure based on Gaia ideas. And maybe we also can look on to other parts of the world. all those countries, consortia, projects start thinking about, okay, how does an infrastructure really look like? And this might be IDS based, this might be based on Gaia Federated Services, this might be something that another country comes up with on their own, fitting their very own needs. At the end, what I always see, and I also saw it here in your slides, the connector and the base for being interoperable starts with the connector. And yeah, let's dig into this very important and interesting topic throughout the year and explore it further. I'm really looking forward to see also the NTT use case with SCSN Fly, see how it goes together with Catena, and so on and so forth. Maybe we have time for one quick question left. Let's see what I pick. There were so many interesting topics. So one question that the audience might have now, it's like having an inspiring example in front of us called SCSN. Maybe there are people now here in the audience from another domain also dealing with the idea, okay, let's build our data space. Let's build our SCSN-alike data space with connectors, infrastructure, etc. How to proceed concretely? Is the four-corner model the answer to this, or one part of the answer? How can I get a concrete step-by-step approach to getting closer to have something up and running like you do? Maybe Matthijs or Mike. Mike, you presented the four-corner model.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's better. So sorry for that. Yeah, indeed. I think and the four-corner model is really an essential part of making such a data space, because it's really about scalability. And what we already saw in many sectors and many domains is that not all participants are able to handle all IT requirements for joining a data space. So that's why we think the four-corner model is a very valuable model. So on one hand, we have very specialized companies which are able to build connections and great integrations on top of, for example, the IDS connector. And on the other hand, we have the users, which might not need to be educated to such a large extent about the IDS. They are actually the user of the service, and the split between the required knowledge is, I think, very powerful. So it's not a requirement for a data space, but I would highly recommend using such a model of scalability to ensure large-scale adoption.
Great, thank you, Mike, for this quick answer. I see one very short question here in the chat by Martel asking about when an address book will be available and complete. I think this is something you might already have an answer. I think address book refers to a broker, IDS broker component, something like that, or Paris, participant information system. Do you have it on your timeline already?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And indeed, we do have an address book based on IDS broker at this moment. Not all of the foreign companies are already connected to this address book to the full extent. So we do have about, I think, 70 companies which are already completely connected to this. And we hope that this year we make sure that all the other companies are also migrating to this new address book to make sure that we also have more transparency of who is part of SCSN. Perfect.
Thank you very much. I'm very afraid time-wise we're at the end of this session. The discussion does not stop here, of course. I can see by Hans some more questions who also wants to connect to NTT directly. I think we can somehow figure a way out to bring you in contact with Koki-san. So thank you very much for being here with us, Matthijs, Mike, Erik, Martin. A great session, a great start into the year, and I'm really looking forward for the upcoming discussions. Especially interoperability, but of course not only, will be a topic that we will discuss in more detail with more time during our IDS Winter Days on 16th and 17th of February. Please check out the International Data Spaces webpage. for this event. Register it. The registration is for free. Join us. Get into the discussions with us. Yeah, thanks, Andreas. There also is the slide for the winter days. Be with us at this event or any other event to stay in contact. I wish all of you a good ramp up to this interesting year ahead of us. Thanks again, and yeah, stay safe. Goodbye, everyone.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.